These three are the strongest candidates. Shout out Christie.
Candidates will have 1 minute and 30 seconds for answers and the opportunity for a closing statement. Follow-ups will be at the discretion of all of us at the table, the moderators. Invoking a candidate's name or policy does not necessarily mean the mentioned candidate is entitled to a response. We want to caution all the candidates not to interrupt or speak over your fellow debaters. If you talk over each other, the voters can't hear you. And given the critical issues we're facing specifically on the world stage, we want everyone to hear every word you have to say. Continued interruptions may result in loss of additional questions. And to our audience, please hold your applause so that the candidates can be heard. With that said, let's have a good debate. All right, our first question, the opening question, is one for all of you. Donald Trump is the first ex-president in more than 100 years to remains popular among Republican primary voters as his legal challenges mount. Governor DeSantis, let me begin with you on this one. Speak to Republican voters who are supporting Donald Trump. Why should you and not him be the Republican nominee to face Joe Biden a year from now?
I'm going to repeat it once more as we do our reaction and publish this on YouTube, of course, is that all of Tim Scott's stuff I'm deleting. I reacted to this a couple days later. He fell out the race. He decided he's not running for president anymore. So his opinions basically don't matter. So I'm going to keep that here. I'm not Tim Scott is missing for a reason.
From now.
This country is in trouble. And the elites that have put us here, they don't care about you. They don't care that you're having to grapple with higher grocery prices or have higher gas prices. They don't care that your family's less secure because of the open border that's allowed drugs and even terrorists to come into this country. Well, I care. I am not going to sit idly by and let this country continue its downward spiral. We need leadership, and we need it now. I'll take the hits, I'll take the arrows, I'll take the slings, because ultimately it's not about me. It's about you. I will fight for you. I will make sure to lead this country's revival, and I will win for you and your family. Actions speak louder than words. We don't have time for excuses, and it's not something that we're going to be able to have all these distractions. As a veteran, I will get the job done. Now, if you look where we are now, it's a lot different than where we were in 2016. And Donald Trump's a lot different guy than he was in 2016. He owes it to you to be on this stage and explain why he should get another chance. He should explain why he didn't have Mexico pay for the border wall. He should explain why he racked up so much debt. He should explain why he didn't drain the swamp. And he said Republicans were going to get tired of
Let me see how I want to approach this. Let's go to random. See how I want to approach this. He went over Donald Trump not doing a lot of the policies. Trump not doing his job. Just basically
winning. Well, we saw last night, I'm sick of Republicans losing. In Florida, I showed how it's done. 1 year ago here, we won a historic victory, including a massive landslide right here in Miami-Dade County. That's how we have to do it. So I promise you this, as the nominee, next November, I'll get the job done. And as president, I will deliver.
Your time is up. Let me turn to Ambassador Haley.
Okay.
Let me turn to Ambassador Haley. Why you and not the former president?
Well, I think you look at the fact that we're almost $34 trillion.
And I'm going to say this right now. My favorite after 2 debate panels is Nikki Haley. I'm not going to pretend that it's not, but I will try to be objective in kind of diagnosing what they're saying. So let's rock.
$1 in debt. 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. 50% of American families can't afford diapers. 1 in 6 American families can't pay their utility bills. You have parents who are worried about what's being said or taught to their child in the classroom. There's no transparency. We have anti-Semitism all over our college campuses, and students feel unsafe. You've got an open border where terrorists can come through, and we've got wars happening all all over us, and there are dangers around us. You know, everybody wants to talk about President Trump. Well, I can talk about President Trump. I can tell you that I think he was the right president at the right time. I don't think he's the right president now. I think that he put us $8 trillion in debt, and our kids are never going to forgive us for that. I think the fact that he used to be right on Ukraine and foreign issues, now he's getting weak in the knees and trying to be friendly again. I think that we've got to go back to the fact that we can't live in the past. We can't live in other headlines. We've got to start focusing on what's going to make America strong and proud. And that's what I'm focused on doing. Let's make sure we pay down our debt. I think we need an accountant in the White House. Let's make sure that we have transparency in the classroom. As a mom, I know what that means. Let's make sure we secure our borders so that our families are safe. Let's get crime down, because our families want to know that they can be safe no matter where they go. And as the wife of a combat veteran, I will tell you, a military needs to know we have our back, and we need to make sure that America is strong.
Ambassador, thank you very much. And,
Former ambassador of the UN.
let me just caution the audience. Let's not go down this road. We've asked you to please, keep restrain yourselves, and it would be helpful so we can hear the candidates, because these are important issues and the voters want and need to hear them. Mr. Ramaswamy, let me turn to you. Please make your case. Why should you be the nominee and not the former president?
I think there's something deeper going on in the Republican Party here, and I am upset about what happened last night. We've become a party of losers at the end of the day. There's a cancer in the Republican establishment. Let's speak the truth. I mean, since Ronna McDaniel took over as chairwoman of the RNC in 2017, we have lost 2018, 2020, 2022, no red wave that never came. We got trounced last night in 2023. And I think that we have to have accountability in our party. For that matter, Ron, if you want to come on stage tonight, you want to look the GOP voters in the eye and tell them you resign, I will yield my time to you. And frankly, look, the people there cheering for losing in the Republican Party. Think about who's moderating this debate. This should be Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan, and Elon Musk. We'd have 10 times the viewership, asking questions that GOP primary voters actually care about and bringing more people into our party.
What? Why? What? I think see, Vivek plays the politics game very well. He only cares about clicks and numbers, and he cares about views, and cares about talking about issues that don't matter. Or when he says have them come on and talk about issues that matter, he really means talk about issues that don't matter, i.e. culture war issues, and talk about how we're going to, make sure the trans movement doesn't get out of the hand, or, is there two genders, stuff like that, instead of talking about what actually matters when it comes to the country. So I don't know what the point of this was. It sounds like he's posturing.
Do you think the Democrats, and we've got Kristen Welker here, do you think the Democrats would actually hire Greg Gutfeld to host a Democratic debate? They wouldn't do it. And so the fact of the matter is, Kristen, I'm going to use this time because this is actually about you.
They wouldn't bring popular Democratic, people for debate either. They wouldn't bring in, what's that one talk show host? Is it Bill Maher? I don't know talk show hosts that often. They wouldn't bring in people like that either. I don't get there's no point being made here. This is not a good point. Republican accountability, I hear you, but at the end of the day, and if I'm being completely honest, the issues that affect Americans the most are issues that are not being translated on social media. You just want social media views. You don't want real people getting invested into the cause. And I'm not a Republican. It just doesn't make any sense.
You in the media and the corrupt media establishment ask you the Trump-Russia collusion hoax that you pushed on this network for years. Was that real, or was that Hillary Clinton made up disinformation? Answer the question. Go.
Mr. Roberts.
Sorry. This is how we get our country back.
What? We're talking about why you would be a better candidate than Trump. And instead you're attacking the moderators? Bro, this is what kind of, he wants to be president, by the way. He wants to be president. I don't see the point of this, attack, even if you think it's legitimate. Like, that's not the question. But again, politics game one.
We need accountability because this media rigged the 2016 election. They rigged the 2020.
Okay, now Vivek is basically Trump 2.0. He's saying they rigged the election. He's basically saying, no, I'm not a good candidate compared to Trump. Trump is a better candidate than me, which is why he's not answering the question. That's basically what he's telling me right now.
20 election with the Hunter Biden laptop story,
Mr. Ramaswamy,
and they're going to rig this election.
Your time is up.
Accountability.
Let me turn to
That's how we unite this
Governor
country.
Christie. Why audience, let's not do this. Let's not do this. Let's let the candidates speak. Governor Christie, why you and not former President Trump?
That was a terrible,
Lester, look,
terrible speech.
you said it at the beginning of the debate. We are dealing with extraordinarily important issues facing this country right now.
And Vivek didn't.
We have our greatest ally in the Middle East under fire from a terrorist group that has committed to wiping them and every Jewish person in this world off the map. We have Ukraine with Vladimir Putin, a communist KGB dictator who wants to put the old band back together. He's starting in Ukraine, and he's going to move to the Baltics and Poland after that. We have inflation in this country that is choking every American family that wants to try to rise up and give their children a better life. And tonight, we need to decide which president is going to be the one to tackle the big issues, who's going to make this country look once again, not just inward, but look outward at the world and say America is the country, the indispensable nation that makes this a safer world. And in a safer world, American innovation, American hard work has always been the thing that has driven our country to greater things. I'm going to be the president who will do those big things. We're not going to be small, and I'll say this about Donald Trump. Anybody who's going to be spending the next year and a half of their life focusing on keeping themselves out of jail and courtrooms cannot lead this party or this country,
right,
and
Governor,
it needs to be said plainly.
Governor, thank you. Let me turn to Senator Scott. Senator Scott, you've said former President Trump can't win. Make your case to Republican voters.
Well, certainly. What I would say without any question is that the truth.
Sorry, Tim Scott, you fell out the presidential race, so I'm not listening to a single word you said. All right, let's move on. Right here.
That is, in fact,
the next commander-in-chief. You'll all be fielding questions first from me and the Republican Jewish Coalition, and then from Kristen and Hugh. So as we continue forward, the Israel-Hamas war is barely a month old. Tonight, Israeli troops are fighting inside Gaza City with over 200 hostages who remain captive there, and civilian casualties mount inside Gaza. As President of the United States, what would you be urging Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to do at this moment? Governor DeSantis.
I would be telling Bibi, finish the job once and for all with these butchers, Hamas. They're terrorists. They're massacring innocent people. They would wipe every Jew off the globe if they could. He cannot live with that threat right by his country. That Hamas should release every hostage and they should unconditionally surrender. I'm sick of hearing the media, I'm sick of hearing other people blame Israel just for defending itself. We will stand with Israel in word and in deed, in public and in private. And I can tell you, as governor, I actually did something about it. Biden's neglect has been atrocious. We had Floridians that were over there after the attack. He left them stranded. They couldn't get flights out. So I scrambled resources in Florida. I sent planes over to Israel, and I brought back over 700 people to safety. There could have been
sent planes, save 700 Floridians. Okay, DeSantis. I will be like, I don't. I've already said this before, that the Israel and Palestine conflict is much more complicated than people make it out to be. It's not a very simple Israel or Palestine. What is very simple is the far right wing of Israel is bad, basically, to kind of put it very simply for people. And then Hamas is bad. Those are the simple parts. But the conflict is more than those two parts. We all know this, right? So I won't really speak on that in terms of like what they say, because obviously they're going to have their viewpoint. Republicans right now are pro-Israel, so I assume that they're going to kind of cater to that in this conversation, which is fine. Do what you got to do. So I'm not
more
I'm not gonna
hostages had we not acted. And I'll tell you this, I met the first plane load when they came to Florida, and one of the mothers pointed to a 6-year-old daughter, and she said, my daughter had been saying the last 2 nights, Mommy, I don't want to hear any more bombs, no more rockets. I just want to get back to Florida. So there's a difference between words and deeds. We acted and we saved lives.
Thank you. Ambassador Haley, what would you do? What would you be urging
that's the point for
Prime Minister
DeSantis,
Benjamin Netanyahu to do? Would you consider humanitarian pause, for example?
The first thing I said to him when it happened was I said, finish them. Finish them. And the reason is I worked on this every day when I was at the United Nations. And we have to remember that they have to, 1, eliminate Hamas, 2, support Israel with whatever they need whenever they need it, and 3, make sure we bring our hostages home. We need to be very clear-eyed to know there would be no Hamas without Iran. There would be no Hezbollah without Iran. There would not be the Houthis without Iran. And there wouldn't be the Iranian militias in Syria and Iraq that are trying to hit our military men and women if it hadn't been for Iran. And who is funding Iran right now? China is buying oil from Iran. Russia is getting drones and missiles from Iran. And there is an unholy alliance. We need to be clear-eyed. The last thing we need to do is to tell Israel what to do. The only thing we should be doing is supporting them and eliminating Hamas. It is not that Israel needs America. America needs Israel. They are the tip of the spear when it comes to this Islamic terrorism, and we need to make sure that we have their backs in that process.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Ramaswamy. Mr. Ramaswamy, any daylight between you and the candidates we just heard on this issue, on what you would tell the Prime Minister?
Not in terms of what I would tell the Prime Minister.
Before, okay, let me finish writing this down. Israel, important to deal with, important Islamic terror. I will say this. I mean, I get where she's coming from in the sense that, like, their viewpoint is Israel's positioning, right? Israel has a very strategic and very important position in dealing with this, with these circumstances, basically, especially Iran, whatever. So I see the viewpoint. I mean, if you're America, you want to have strategic positions in a lot of places all over the world, and having allies in these places is crucial. I say to people all the time that want to be kind of isolationist is that I get where you're coming from, but we need to recognize that there's 2 very important things for the United States to do. 1, they need to have allies across the country due to obviously needing help in the future for whatever reason. And 2, we need to make sure that we're not allowing our enemies to get more powerful. So these 2 aspects are very important, which is why pure isolationism is foolish, because if we did something like that, other countries will gain more allies and become more powerful due to certain positions and certain strategic positions, of course. So these are valuable things to consider when we're having these conversations.
No. In fact, I would go one step further. The founding vision of Israel was based on the idea that they don't want to depend on anybody else's sympathy or direction in defending themselves. So what I would tell Bibi is that Israel has the right and the responsibility to defend itself. I would tell him to smoke those terrorists on his southern border, and then I'll tell him as President of the United States, I'll be smoking the terrorists on our southern border. That's his responsibility. This is our responsibility. That's how we move forward. But I want to be careful to avoid making the mistakes from the neocon establishment of the past. Corrupt politicians in both parties spent trillions, killed millions.
See, this is kind of like this very simplistic Republican rhetoric that I just said, that I just talked about, that is problematic. And again, the people who go like, hey, we got to protect our own borders. We can protect our own borders. And we can help our allies. It's foolish to ever think that America, being the strongest country in the world, having the best military in the world, being the #1 economy in the world, is unable to help our allies and protect our borders. The problem, obviously, is that we're not doing it. We don't have a clear direction on how we want to do it. Now, Biden, as of right now, he is rebuilding that wall, from what I've seen, and he is getting Mexico to help with the funding more than Donald Trump has done. So those are some things that I heard, and it's always shaky on how we deal with people who are suffering from other countries, and we need to be stricter in our way in handling these situations. But leaving Israel to defend themselves, not giving them the Iron Curtain that we gave them, allowing Israel to fall is the last thing we want. Allowing Ukraine to fall is the last thing we want. I don't know why Vivek thinks this is a good idea. I don't understand why he thinks this is a good idea at all. This is a terrible idea.
Made billions for themselves in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, fighting wars that sent thousands of our sons and daughters, people my age, to die in wars that did not advance anyone's interests, adding $7 trillion to our national debt. And Joe Biden sold off our foreign policy. Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, got a $5 million bribe from Ukraine. That's why we're sending $200 billion back to that same country.
That's a lie. Don't listen to Vivek. That is a terrible reason why we are sending... Hunter Biden is the reason why we're sending money to Ukraine is the dumbest shit I ever heard. And I'm so tired of Republicans connecting pieces to make a huge declaration of action. It's so ridiculous that nobody in their actual logical mind, if we use actual logic, there's no way the president of the United States, the most checked and balanced person in our country, is able to just send money to other countries because of their son. That is the dumbest thing I ever heard. There's no evidence to prove this at all. I'm so tired of this. Vivek is getting worse, bro.
The fact of the matter is the Republican Party is not that much better. You have the likes of Nikki Haley, who stepped down from her time at the UN. Bankrupt or in debt was her family. Then she becomes a military contractor. She joins the board of Boeing and otherwise, and is now a multimillionaire. So I think that that's wrong with...
What? I gotta hear that again, because what point did he make? My family went bankrupt. I did work, and I became a millionaire. Like, what's the point here? What point are he's reaching? Because he's the guy that he glazes also went bankrupt and became a millionaire. So I don't get the point here.
Republicans do it or Democrats do it. That's the choice we face. Do you want a leader from a different generation who's going to put this country first, or do you want Dick Cheney in 3-inch heels?
All right, Mr.
In which case, we've got two of them on stage.
Mr. Ramaswamy, thank you. Senator Scott.
Yes.
Senator.
Vivek is pissed. If you saw Republican debate panel number 2, Nikki was tearing up Vivek. So he's so pissed that he had to bring it to him for this third one. I mean, he called her Dick Cheney. I don't have a strong opinion on Dick Cheney, but yeah, I don't know what point he made. There was no point there. Not gonna lie.
Same question to you about you're the president. You're on the phone in the Oval Office with the Prime Minister. You tell him what?
Well, number one, I would tell us a
I'm not gonna skip everything you said, Tim Scott.
Here, these problems are so big and serious that the first thing I would say to Prime Minister Netanyahu is pretty simple. America is here, no matter what it is you need at any time to preserve the state of Israel. Remember that Hamas's main goal is to get rid of Israel, is to get Israel absolutely off the map. Now, there are 3 things I think I would say to him when he asked for advice. The first I would say is that it is absolutely your obligation to protect the territorial integrity of Israel. Secondly, to make sure you protect the security and the safety of your people. Every time something happens to compromise either one of those things, it creates greater unrest in the entire region. Second, you must go in and make sure that Hamas can never do this again. The fact is that Israel and their intelligence community failed. They failed here, and they failed the people of the state of Israel. And so we need to work closely and better together to make sure, 1, that they're degraded, and 2, that we know everything that's going on inside the Gaza Strip when it's going on, so that something like this can't happen to kill 1,400 individuals again. And the third thing is to keep your eye on the ball. Make sure that we continue to isolate Iran. Work with the reasonable nations in the Middle East, the other Arab nations who want to partner with you, and make sure that we continue to isolate Iran so that their only friends in the world are the part of the evil foursome: China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea.
Governor Christie, thank you very much. And we're going to continue in this vein right now with a question from Matthew Brooks, the CEO of the Republican Jewish Coalition, a partner of the Republican National Committee in this debate. Here it is.
What's with all these echoes?
Given attacks by Iranian-backed proxy groups on U.S. military bases in Syria and Iraq, attacks that have wounded approximately 24 of our U.S. servicemen, do you support the use of military force by the United States against Iran?
Governor Haley, would you please answer that?
Yes, I'd first like to say they're 5-inch heels, and I don't wear them unless you can run in them.
We got two of you on stage.
The second thing that I will say is,
yo, Vivek is struggling so hard to deal with Nikki Haley. I'm gonna keep on repeating it because I honestly 100% think that Nikki Haley is the best politician here. I think she is by far the best politician here. I don't think any of them could legit, like, if we take out bias from the Republican Party, I don't think any of them can legit beat her in a debate, right? That's what I don't think that's possible. I'm just saying. I gotta read.
I wear heels. They're not for a fashion statement. They're for ammunition. What we need to be doing for Iraq and Syria is, first of all, the idea that our men and women could be targeted and that we've allowed almost 100 hits to happen under Biden's watch is unthinkable. We need to understand this is Iran giving the green light, telling them what to do, and we shouldn't be doing the tit for tat like what Joe Biden has done. We need to go and take out their infrastructure that they are using to make those strikes with so they can never do it again. Iran responds to strength. You punch them one and you punch them hard and they will back off. But what we don't need is Biden falling all over himself to get back in the Iran deal. Him giving $6 billion to get 5 hostages home. Him telling Netanyahu now that he needs a pause or a ceasefire. We don't need him going and sitting there tiptoeing around Iran because he thinks they're going to do something. You don't respond to an enemy and a terrorist with fear. You respond with strength. When you do that, that's when the world pays attention, and that's when Iran stops.
Thank you. Governor DeSantis, if I can continue with you.
That's going to be somewhat controversial. I'm curious to see what everybody else says, because obviously if we respond in strength, we don't know what type of conflict can arise between America and Iran. I mean, as of right now, as they said, Iran, Russia, and China are like the 3 powers. I'm pretty sure they're all part of BRICS too. So it's a very tricky situation, especially if they're all kind of helping each other. Very tricky situation.
Just today, the U.S. launched another one of its limited airstrikes against targets in Syria, this time Iranian-linked facility. How far would you go militarily to hold Iran accountable?
Well, first, Matt, thanks for your question, and I appreciate what you've done over the last month. I know it's been very difficult for the community, and appreciate you guys rallying together in difficult times. I actually served in Iraq back in the day, and we had al-Qaeda in Iraq. You had Shia militias that were funded by Iran that were killing hundreds and hundreds of U.S. troops. And as Commander-in-Chief, I am not going to put our troops in harm's way unless you're willing to defend them with everything you have. Biden has them out there. They're sitting ducks. He's doing glancing blows. That's just inviting more attacks from the Iranians. I would say you harm a hair on the head of an American service member, and you are going to have hell to pay. We are not just going to sit there and let our service members be sitting ducks, and that's true whether it's Iran or whether it's any country on the world. We have to be strong, and we have to defend the people who defend us.
All right, thank you, Governor. Now our second and final question from Matthew Brooks of the Republican Jewish Coalition. Please watch.
Also very less controversial in how he put that.
Jewish students across the country are threatened and under attack. What do you say to Jewish students on college campuses who feel unsafe given the dramatic rise in anti-Semitism? And what do you say to university presidents and college presidents who have not met the moral clarity moment to forcefully condemn Hamas terrorism.
Mr. Ramaswamy, would you like to take that one?
Absolutely. I think the scourge of anti-Semitism across this country, including at places like my alma maters and places like Brooklyn Bridge in New York, it's sad to see, but here's what history teaches us. Anti-Semitism is a symptom of a deeper cancer in a country and a society that is lost, and we are lost. Several years ago, when I wrote my first book, Woke Inc., I was talking about they were chanting death to America. Death to white people, death to Christians. Nobody was waking up back then. Now it's even bad. Now they're saying death to Israel and worse. So it is wrong, but we have to get to the root cause here. Now, I think it's really important that we do this through leadership, not censorship. Leadership means fill that void with purpose and meaning. Dilute this wokeism and anti-Semitism to irrelevance. These kids, they have no idea what the heck they're even talking about when they're siding with Hamas over Israel. They are fools. But I also want to caution here, if we go the direction of Ron DeSantis or Nikki Haley, with whom I respectfully disagree on this issue, pro-censorship, telling student groups to disband, mark my words, soon they will say if you question a vaccine and its side effects, you're a bioterrorist. Soon they will say that if you show up at a school board meeting, you're a domestic terrorist. Soon if they say that J6 prisoners should be released, you're an insurrectionist terrorist. So that's where this road ends. We don't quash this with censorship because that creates a worse underbelly. We quell it through leadership by calling it out. These university administrators have lost their way, and we need leadership at the top in the United States of America that restores our founding values and that has no place for this kind of anti-Semitic hate. That's where I stand while respecting our Constitution.
Your time is out. Senator.
My issue is everything he just said. Because, like, the whole thing, because I've talked about this in length, the whole stuff where people are afraid of censorship is foolish. This is a lie. People are not afraid of censorship. We censor all the time, right? The issue, when it comes down to it, is the moment they start breaking that line to preaching violence and hateful rhetoric to an extent, that's when it gets very touchy, right? But I'm not even going to touch that. My issue is he didn't say anything. Right? He said, call it out and better leadership. What the hell does that mean? Call it. So if the dean of the institution decides to go down, talk to the student saying, y'all are fools, you don't know what you're talking about, are they going to disband? What values exactly do you want to institute in your institution that will translate enough to these students for them to stop doing what they're doing? Again, you didn't say anything. It sounds good. That's what it does. It sounds good. But there's no actual step-by-step action plan that you're implementing here. You're just fluff. All fluff. That's all that's coming out of your mouth. I'm gonna hear Nikki Haley DeSantis because if they just say, you know, they need to be specific, because this is a very touchy situation when it comes to political protesting, right? Because that is covered under the First Amendment, freedom of speech. And if all they're doing is protesting peacefully, even though ignorantly, even though if they support Hamas, I don't know, actually. Will that be okay? Because, like, if you look up on the internet, how do I join a terrorist group? I feel like that is cause for concern. If you looked up on the internet how to build a grenade, that is cause for concern. So if you're out on the streets supporting a terrorist group, isn't that cause for concern? Like, imagine people on the streets saying, I support Al-Qaeda after 9/11. Wouldn't that be cause for concern? So that's why I'm like, I don't think there's an actual, I don't think this is actually expressing your freedom of speech, your freedom to protest. Because Hamas, part of their doctrine is to kill all Jews. So inherently supporting a cause that wants to kill all Jews, who wants to complete, genocide at the ethnic scale. What is it called? Ethnic cleansing, basically. Inherently, that shouldn't be covered under freedom of speech. So again, Vivek is not saying anything.
Senator Scott, let me get you to weigh in on what you just heard.
Well, let me just say to
Sorry, Tim Scott, you left the race, so I don't care about anything you're saying.
Kent to say, if you are here on a student visa as a foreign national, you're making common cause with Hamas, I'm canceling your visa and I'm sending you home. No questions asked.
Wait, let me hear this.
campuses and
Senator
frankly,
Scott, thank you. Let me
out of our country.
Let me turn to the Governor DeSantis here. What do you think about?
I kind of feel bad for Tim Scott, but at the same time, he just doesn't have that. He just doesn't. At the end of the day, when it comes to being president, you gotta really establish yourself, right?
What he just said.
I was the first presidential candidate to say, if you are here on a student visa as a foreign national, you're making common cause with Hamas, I'm canceling.
This is common cause with Hamas. I had that big kind of long, I guess, dialogue about Hamas basically being a terrorist group. So I can't be too mad if you're a foreign national and you align with Hamas. Then at that point, why are you in this country, right? I mean, I kind of get where he's coming from. I just need to know what you mean by align. That's basically my big.
Canceling your visa and I'm sending you home. No questions asked. Second, I have friends here in Florida who their kids do not feel safe even going to university campus at all outside of the state of Florida. You have Jewish students fleeing for their lives at Cooper Union. Joe Biden should have the Department of Justice on these college campuses and holding the universities accountable for civil rights violations. When you should not have money going to these places. I already acted in Florida. We had a group, Students for Justice of Palestine. They said they are common cause with Hamas. They said, we're not just in solidarity, this is what we are. We deactivated them. We're not going to use state tax dollars to fund jihad. No way. And what is Biden doing? Not only is he not helping the Jewish students who are being persecuted, he is launching an initiative to combat so-called Islamophobia. No, it's the anti-Semitism that's spiraling out of control. Right. That is what we have to confront. And as president, I can tell you this, we are not going to stand for this on college campuses any longer.
This is so tough because that's such a harsh stance. The reason why I say that is because, well, everything when he says align with Hamas, I'm there. But taking funding from the institution itself, I don't know if I'm there, because there's a lot of kids that are just there for college. So they're going to lose resources because of some stupid student organization. I don't know if I'm there for you. I don't know if I agree with that. And then my other thing with what he said is that we shouldn't, and to be fair, I don't know if I feel like Joe Biden is not only, I would have to fact check it, but if Joe Biden is making like a wave or going out with a kind of this movement that he's trying to push in terms of dealing with Islamophobia, that's fine to me if he's keeping the same energy for anti-Semitism, which I feel like Biden probably would be, but I don't really know, so I'm not going to speak on that. But I think we should keep the same energy for both sides, though, because yes, anti-Semitism is very bad. Islamophobia is also very bad. A lot of people on the right don't like Muslims. A lot of people on the left don't like Jews. Both of you are idiots. That is my stance.
All right, Governor, thank you. Let me turn to Governor Christie, and considering what he just said, you led a state with a sizable Muslim population. Last month, as you know, a 6-year-old Palestinian-American boy was killed in Illinois by his landlord. His mother was all.
Exactly what I just said, bro. It's happening on both sides, so it's kind of arrogant to say that we don't have an Islamophobia problem. Very arrogant to say that.
Also stabbed more than a dozen times in what has been charged as a hate crime. What do you say to Muslim Americans who are also feeling afraid for their safety right now?
Lester, I'm the only one on the stage who's actually had experience in dealing with this. I was appointed by President Bush to be the U.S. Attorney in New Jersey on September 10th, 2001. And when I took over that job after the September 11th attacks, I had to deal with a situation in our state that was explosive. We're the most ethnically diverse state in this country. And so first, we heard credible reports about Jewish students and synagogues being threatened in our state in the aftermath of 9/11. We made sure that we sent federal agents to those synagogues and we protected them, and the same thing should be being done now. At the very same time, I personally went from mosque to mosque in New Jersey and met with the leaders of those mosques and with the members of the mosques. And I said to them, law enforcement is on your side to protect you, regardless of your religion, if you are going to comply with the law. And we developed fabulous relationships with Muslim Americans all across the state of New Jersey, and we stopped any hate crimes that were going on either against Jewish Americans in New Jersey or Muslim Americans in New Jersey. It takes leadership, Lester, to know how to do this. You must work with both sides. Both sides need to know it, but let us never have a false moral equivalence between Hamas and Hezbollah and the Jewish people. The Jewish people stand for right and justice, and Hamas and Hezbollah stand for death.
Governor Christie, thank you. Ambassador Haley,
that's a good point.
What do you say to Americans who are simply afraid right now in this current environment that we're talking about?
I think, you look at the country, and the country is all out of sorts. I think, look at what these kids are dealing with on college campuses. What makes me so angry is not only do you have the kids barricaded in the library, they've said they were going to shoot up the kosher dining hall. You've got kids' dorm rooms who are being set on fire because they have something related to Israel on their doors. No person should ever feel in danger like this. And this is what I would say about our college presidents, is if the KKK were doing this, every college president would be up in arms. This is no different. You should treat it exactly the same. Anti-Semitism is just as awful as racism, and we've got to make sure they're protected. And for everybody that's protesting on these college campuses in favor of Hamas, let me remind you something. Hamas said death to Israel and death to America. They hate and would kill you too. And the idea that they're talking about genocide for the Jewish people, that's not the values of America. That's not us. We're better than that. We don't need to celebrate terrorists. We don't need to celebrate genocide. We don't need to celebrate violence towards anybody. We need to go back and soul search in our country and remember what we are about. And we are about taking care of people, not going and making them live in fear because some other terrorist activity says they want to destroy them.
Ambassador, thank you. Kristen.
Lester, thank you. This is another question for the entire field, so you will all get a chance to respond. But Senator Scott, I'd like to start with you. The United States has given Ukraine financial and military support since the war began more than 600 days ago. President Zelensky told me on Sunday, if Russia isn't stopped now, quote, the price will be higher for the United States, and Americans would be forced to, quote, send your sons and daughters to defend NATO countries. Senator Scott, where do you stand on more
vital? As we secure, understand for all military, made that home.
Actually enjoying watching the...
Thank you, Senator Scott. Mr. Ramaswamy, are you persuaded by President Zelensky's urgent new plea? Where do you stand on more funding?
I'm absolutely unpersuaded. And I'm actually enjoying watching the Ukraine hawks quietly, delicately tiptoe back from their position as this thing has unwound into a disaster. The first half of this race, I was the only person standing for it. Now they're actually quietly coming around to being more cautious, as they should. Level.
What were you talking about? I need names. Vivek just be saying stuff. I don't know if anything he says is true. I will be watching a full, I think it's, I forget what the podcast called, where Vivek is on the channel. I doubt anybody will push back against him, but I'm going to listen to his positions fully.
With the American people here, Ukraine is not a paragon of democracy. This is a country that has banned 11 opposition parties. It has consolidated all media into one state TV media arm. That's not democratic. It has threatened not to hold elections this year unless the U.S. forks over more money. That is not democratic. It has celebrated a Nazi in its ranks, the comedian in cargo pants, a man called Zelensky, doing it in their own ranks. That is not democratic. More facts for you that you won't hear from the mainstream in either party or the mainstream media. The regions of Ukraine that are occupied by Russia right now in the Donbass, Luhansk, Donetsk, These are Russian-speaking regions that have not even been part of Ukraine since 2014, that other people probably couldn't name those provinces for you. Those are the hard facts. And so to frame this as some kind of battle between good...
This is the reason why this is and let me write this down real quick. Ukraine isn't democratic. It's basically what I'm gonna put here. The facts that he just said is a terrible point. And the reason why it's a terrible point is, should Ukraine be willing to kind of compromise in some territory? I think so. Is this conflict about those territories? No. Conflict is about Russia trying to take over the entirety of Ukraine. So, misleading facts to push a narrative, of course. But, you know, that's what Vivek does. It is okay. I don't believe anything Vivek says because he kind of... This is a very unique technique that people do. Terrible technique. Is they find factual statements and draw false conclusions. And they picture it as fact. Right? The stuff with the elections, I don't even know if that's true. Where he made some factual claims. Ukraine wants money from America. Ukraine is not holding elections. Ukraine is not holding elections because they want money from America. Are those two things inherently connected? I'm not sure. Should I look it up? Let's look it up. Let's see if Vivek is lying. It's possible. I won't doubt it. Ukraine won't hold elections till America sends money. Let me just look it up through here, right? Ukraine holds off elections until America sends money. Okay. Let's look at this. The article from MSN. Will they tell the truth? Who knows? But I'm going to read it anyway. As the Russian invasion of Ukraine... I'm not going to read the whole thing. In honor of our great veterans on Veterans Day, we pledge to you that we will not root out the commie... Okay, come on now. Given the devastation of the war, Ukrainian President Zelensky has determined that now is not the right time for elections in Ukraine. Instead, Zelensky has promised to continue reforming the country and defending Ukraine from the ongoing invasion. Once the war is ended, he has pledged to hold elections. So where's the statement that says, I'm not holding elections till America sends money? See, like, Vivek is a liar, bro. Like, that, I don't know what to tell you. Vivek is a liar. So that's why I'm like, I can't believe anything he says. Pure and simple.
Versus evil, don't buy it. And I'd like the likes of the sharpest of the war hawks on Ukraine, Nikki Haley, to have some accountability and answer. Do you want to use U.S. taxpayer money to fund the banning of Christians? That is actually what's happening. They're using the Ukrainian Orthodox.
Let's be very clear. Anytime Republican says U.S. taxpayer money, they're just virtue signaling and making you feel bad. They don't really care.
Orthodox Church, they have banned them. The Ukrainian parliament just did this last week, supported by our dollars. And I think you owe it to the...
Ukraine banned Christians? Wait. Because this could be another lie. Hold up.
Likes of the sharpest of the war hawks on Ukraine, Nikki Haley, to have some accountability and answer. Do you want to use U.S. taxpayer money to fund the banning of Christians? That is actually what's happening. They're using the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. They have banned them. The Ukrainian parliament just did this last week, supported by our.
So this is the reason why he says this is because he wants to get Christians on his side. Again, the politics game. He's trying to say the Ukraine government is banning Christians. Let's look it up. Because I'm tired of Vivek just lying in my face. It's pissing me off. Let's look it up. Ukraine bans Christians. Ukraine banned 16 Russian media sources. Ukrainian parliament votes to ban Orthodox Church over alleged links with Russia. The Ukrainian parliament gave initial approval on Thursday to the law that would ban the Moscow-linked Ukrainian Orthodox Church after Kiev accused it of collaborating with Russia following last year's invasion. Blah blah blah. It says it no longer aligned with the Russian Orthodox Church and denies the charges leveled at it by Kiev and said the draft law would be unconstitutional. The deputies voted to support the bill in its first reading. It would ban the activities of religious organizations affiliated with centers of influence in a state that carries out blah blah blah. So the blah blah Moscow priests from the Ukrainian land. Removing independent separate churches accuse Kiev of trying to pass it off as affiliated with the Russian Ukraine. It's as agents of the Russian Federation. Okay. Government commission. Church. Okay. So again, Vivek lied again. Yes, the parliament is potentially banning that church, but he made it sound like they're banning the church because they don't like Christians. They're banning the church because they're potentially linked to Russia. Vivek is a liar. Whatever. Vivek lies about Christians. It's disgusting. Maybe Nikki Haley will bring
our dollars, and I think you owe it to the American people, Nikki, to at least this one time
Ramaswamy,
condemn.
thank you. That's time.
At least.
I'm so tired of people just lying. And politicians do this where they lie to the people, hoping the people won't look this stuff up. And fortunately for you, everybody that's watching or who has already watched this, all you have to do is a quick Google search to verify if this is true. That's all you got to do. Honestly, it's ridiculous.
Mr. Ramaswamy,
their
thank
banning
you.
of Christians.
Mr. Ramaswamy, thank you. Mr. Ramaswamy, thank you. We asked the questions. Ambassador Haley,
well, she deserves to
what
answer.
is your take on more funding for Ukraine?
I am telling you, Putin and President Xi are salivating at the thought that someone like that could become president. They would love to see
that. The fact of the matter is she doesn't answer
the question. So this is what I will tell you.
We're driving Russia into China's hands because of these foolish
you had your
policies.
time to talk. The ambassador has the floor.
Thank you. The first thing I'll tell you is we all remember what that thug did when he invaded Ukraine. We all know that 500,000 people have died because of Putin. And here is a freedom-loving, pro-American country that is fighting for its survival and its democracy. No, I don't think we should give them cash. I think we should give them the equipment and the ammunition to win. And I'll tell you, if Biden had done it when they first asked for it, this war would be over. But let's also remember this. When you left Afghanistan in shambles and left them with a ton of weapons and money, it's not that we left, it's how we left. When you look at Ukraine, don't think for a second, now everybody wants to move away from Ukraine. They'll want to move away from Israel a year from now. America can never be so arrogant to think we don't need friends. After 9/11, we needed a lot of friends. Now is the time to get partnerships. This unholy alliance between Russia, Ukraine, and China is real. There is a reason the Taiwanese want us to support the Ukrainians. It's because they know that China is coming after them next. There is a reason Ukrainians want us to support Israelis, because they know that if Iran wins, Russia wins.
Ambassador,
we have to see the combination of the three.
Ambassador, thank you. Governor Christie, what is your take, and how long should Americans be expected to help fund the war in Ukraine?
Kirsten, let's remember the last time that we turned our back on a shooting war in Europe. It bought us just a couple of years. And then 500,000 Americans were killed in Europe to defeat Hitler. This is not a choice. This is the price we pay for being the leaders of the free world. And the fact is, this alliance is not just with Russia and China. Governor Haley knows this. Iran is in the middle of this as well, and so is North Korea. And they are all working to support Russia right now. And the reason they're doing it is because dictators work together. People who believe in democracy work together. We must stand with all of those that are standing up for democracy and freedom in this world. And by the way, let's remind everybody of this. In 1992, this country made a promise to Ukraine. We said, if you return nuclear missiles that were part of the old Soviet Union to Russia, and they invade you, we will protect you. An American promise that's 31 years old is no different than an American promise that's made tonight on this stage. We need to stand by it. And those of us who forget history are doomed to repeat it. And
I'd like to respond.
And the absolute giving in to dictators, which is being suggested on this stage, just shows the immaturity of the approach.
Governor Christie, thank you. Governor DeSantis, I'd like you to weigh in on this idea. Are you concerned that this could become a wider war if Putin is not stopped now?
Well, any suggestion by Zelensky or anyone else that we're going to eventually have U.S. troops there, I can tell the American people when I'm president that will not happen. We are not going to send your sons and daughters to Ukraine. I am going to send troops to our southern border. If you look at the threats that we face, terrorists have come in through our southern border. I'm going to shut it down. I'm going to have the military, and I'm going to deport the people who've come, particularly under Biden, who've come from the Middle East, come from all these places. Now, Biden wants $105 billion.
Whoa. You're just going to deport people from the Middle East? That sounds very racist. Not going to lie. Not going to lie. What do you mean just deport the Middle East? What? Like, what?
$60, most of that's Ukraine, including some of it going to pay pensions for bureaucrats and salaries. That is a totally ridiculous use of American tax dollars. He says he has money for border to try to do, and the media repeat that. When you look at it, what most of the money is money to process more illegal aliens into this country. How is that solving the problem? That's making the problem worse. And what does he do for the Indo-Pacific? A pittance. That is the top threat that we face. We need to bring this war to an end. We need the Europeans to step up and do their fair share. And we need to get serious about the top threat that this country faces, which is the Chinese Communist Party.
So if I may respond.
Didn't address the question at all. At all, actually. That kind of annoyed me. I hate when people do this shit. They just don't address the question. You said our biggest priority is China. Haley and Christie brought up the fact that China, Russia, and Iran are both in cahoots making each other more powerful. If Russia takes over Ukraine, China would have incentive to take over Taiwan. So, not addressing that, and even though you know that they're all working together, not addressing that, but also recognizing China is their biggest problem is so arrogant. And you know why he didn't address it? Let's be real. You don't want to know the honest truth of why he didn't address it? It's because he knows Nikki Haley's right, but he has a platform that he wants to. He wants to have the isolationist vote. Politicians never want to be honest. They don't want to be honest to their true opinions. DeSantis, and it tells me all I need to know, the fact that he brought up China. DeSantis knows that Russia is an issue. DeSantis knows Iran is an issue. He knows China is the issue. He just said it. But he's trying to capture certain votes. He's playing the game that is politics. He isn't being honest with the people. And that is what I hate the most. That is what I hate about politics. You're trying to capture votes. You're not trying to help the country.
To the Ukraine question.
In fact, we are going to go from the hot wars in Ukraine and Gaza and Israel to what many people are calling the new Cold War with China. And I remind the audience that it's important for our visitors at home to be able to hear you, and especially for the people in Beijing to hear you. Many Republicans believe that the Chinese Communist Party and General Secretary Xi is an existential threat to the United States. The flashpoint is Taiwan. For decades and decades, the American military, but primarily the United States Navy, has deterred an attack from China to the island state of Taiwan. But Ronald Reagan's Navy of 600 ships is gone. Now, the question to you is, and I'll start with you, Ambassador Haley, because you were in President Trump's cabinet. His goal was a 355-ship Navy. That's what he pushed for. He got to 300. It's now at 291. Is that big enough to deter and, if necessary, defeat an invasion of Taiwan?
China has the largest naval fleet in the world. They have 350 ships. They'll have 400 ships in 2 years. We won't even have 350 ships in 2 decades. China has built up their military. It's not just land, air, and sea. They're doing cyber. They're doing artificial intelligence. They're doing space. America needs to modernize our military. We need to do everything we can. The first thing is you go and you make sure you have the backs of Ukraine. That's why the Taiwanese want us to support Ukraine, because they know that sends the biggest message to China. The second thing is we go to China and we start being tough on them. No more sales of our American soil to China, and let's take back what they've already stolen. Then you go and to the universities. No more having millions of dollars go to our universities. Then we will go and end all formal trade relations with China. The second thing is we go to China and we start being tough on them. No more sales of our American soil to China, and let's take back what they've already stolen. Then you go and to the universities. No more having millions of dollars go to our universities. Then we will.
No millions. Why? What? I don't know if I agree to this. To an extent. I don't know. It depends on what she means. No millions. I don't know. I feel like I'm missing some context behind that statement, but okay.
We'll go and end all formal trade relations with China until they stop murdering Americans from fentanyl, something Ron has yet to say that he's going to do. And then we modernize our military. When we strengthen our military, when we modernize it with the focus of cyber, artificial intelligence, and space, when we make sure that we have the backs of our friends, whether it's in Israel, whether it's in Ukraine, and we should be arming Taiwan. Make sure they have the equipment they need. Make sure they have the training they need now. There is nothing China fears more than knowing that America will have Taiwan's back. Let's make sure that we show it by making sure they have the equipment they need.
Governor DeSantis, my question is specifically about the Navy. It's at 291. It's going to go down perhaps as low as 280. Is it enough? And what would you build if you were going to build more?
Not enough. We have to have the ability to back up a strategy of denial of President Xi's ambitions. And if China's able to be the world's leading superpower, that will affect you and your family in ways that are going to be very bad. They will export authoritarianism all around the world as the cost of doing business. They will impose things like social credit scores and internet monitoring. So this is, to this generation, what the Soviet Union was to the post-World War II generation. I've already released a plan. We're going to get to 355 ships at the end of the first term, 385 ships at the end of the second term, but we're going to have a path to 600 ships over the next 20 years. I think the future of freedom is going to be determined in the Indo-Pacific. We have a strategy not just military, but decoupling from the economy and fighting them here at home with their cultural. You know, Ambassador Haley said somehow I wasn't doing. She welcomed them into South Carolina, gave them land near a military base, wrote the Chinese ambassador a love letter saying what a great friend they were. That was like their #1 way to do economic development. In Florida, I banned China from buying land in this state, and we kicked out on our universities, and we kicked the Confucius Institutes out of our universities. We've recognized the threat, and we've acted swiftly and decisively.
Senator Scott, you've been in the Congress since 2011. Defense spending has fallen over that entire period.
I can't say what was truth and what was fact, what was lies there, to be honest. So I'm just gonna let the shots be shots, to be honest.
Time. Where are we going to get the money, and what would you build, and what kind of ships to deter China from attacking?
Should not be have to explain. America focused come.
The industrial base.
Mr. Ramaswamy, I'm looking for specifics. What would you build? Where would you build it? When would they be in the water? How big would the fleet get?
First answer is end the toxic divest to invest program. For people who don't know about that, we're decommissioning ships in the South China Sea. The foundation of war is economics. Rebuild our defense industrial base at home. But here's the dirty little secret. Our actual defense industrial base depends on China for the supply chain, for the F-35 jets, for the ships that we're building. Think about this. Why are we stockpiling that if it isn't to actually be strong against our enemy, China? We depend on them for that, just like we depend on them for pharmaceuticals, just like we depend on them for semiconductors. So here's why we can't get tough with China. It's because we depend on them for our modern way of life, and we have to declare economic independence from our enemy. That's the Declaration of Independence that Thomas Jefferson, at the age of 33, would have signed. Today, if he were alive, that's the Declaration of Independence that I will sign as the next president. I do have to recognize that Ron DeSantis was correct about acknowledging Nikki Haley's tough talk when she was ambassador to the UN, calling China our great friend.
Nikki Haley looking like she's the person to attack. Nobody's had a good remark. I think DeSantis had some good stuff about Haley. Will she respond? I don't know. But Vivek is trying his hardest to bring down Haley. I can see why too, based off the politics game. The only person that threatens Vivek is Haley. DeSantis is over Vivek. And Vivek doesn't want Haley to catch up to him. So, and Nikki Haley destroyed Vivek on the last one. So, okay.
Bringing the CCP to South Carolina. What he left out, though, Ron, and be honest about it, there was a lobbying-based exemption in that bill that allowed Chinese nationals to buy land within a 20-mile radius of a military base lobbied for by one of your donors. So I think we have to call a spade a spade. We need politicians who are independent of the forces that increase our dependence on China. My message to Xi Jinping is this. You are done buying land in this country. You will not donate to universities in this country. U.S. businesses won't expand into the Chinese market until you play by the same set of rules.
Ramaswamy,
you're kicked out of the WTO, and you actually have to have accountability for the COVID-19 pandemic financially, which unleashed hell on the world.
What? Dude's all over the place. He didn't address the Navy stuff at all. He just economic independence. Also, Nikki Haley and DeSantis apparently, this could be a lie, I don't know if it's true, apparently allowed China to buy land off the states when they were senators. He said nothing about the Navy.
We have to hold them accountable.
Do you have a number and a plan?
I think that we need to increase our naval capacity by at least 20% over the course of the next several years and be able to meet our AUKUS agreement standards. Right now, we are at risk of not even being able to meet our AUKUS standards with Australia and the UK. So what we need to do is have a plan that reverses the trajectory of the divest to invest program
Hugh, I'd like to
by 20% over the next 3 years.
Governor Christie?
You know, my first observation, Hugh, is that nobody answers your question. And my second observation is these three in the middle think they're the enemy. I know China is the enemy, and that's what we should be focused on. So let's be really clear. The nuclear submarines in this United States Navy is the greatest deterrent to Chinese aggression, and that is the first place I would go to increase American naval power. Our nuclear submarines are able to move stealthily, quietly, and effectively, and if we are going to deter China from invading Taiwan, the only way we're going to do it is to make sure that they don't know whether how many nuclear submarines from the United States of America are in the South China Sea and in that area and ready to strike on them if they decide to move on Taiwan. And so we, as our first priority, need to go directly to our nuclear sub program, Hugh, and we need to increase it drastically. That would be priority number one. Ships would come next, but to me, the ships are secondary choice here. The submarines are the single most important thing that we could be deterring, that we could be using to deter China. But the other thing we could do to deter China is to let them know that the blood money they're spending for Russia in Ukraine right now will not be effective, that we send Putin home with his tail between his legs and make them understand that the same fate waits for them if they decide to move towards Taiwan with a more aggressive nuclear sub-program, we'll be able to make that threat real.
Thank you, Governor. We're going to take a brief pause now, and we'll be back to the Republican.
I don't like how the moderators don't let people respond. Not gonna lie, it's kind of annoying. Christie is performing well though.
Republican presidential debate. Once again, here's Hugh Hewitt.
Thank you, Lester. We're going to stay on China, and we're going to talk specifically about TikTok. Last week, Congressman Mike Gallagher, who is chairman of the House Bipartisan Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party, published a long essay on TikTok following the flooding of pro-Hamas propaganda onto TikTok accounts across the United States. Chairman Gallagher called it shocking. He called the app predatory, controlled by America's preeminent adversary, one used to push propaganda and divide America. It's spyware, he said, a means of surveillance. Governor Christie, do you agree with Chairman Gallagher? And if so, would you ban or force the sale of TikTok?
I agree 100% with Chairman Gallagher, and let me say this. TikTok is not only spyware, it is polluting the minds of American young people all throughout this country, and they're doing it intentionally. And when you saw what happened in the last few weeks with all of this anti-Semitic, horrible stuff that their algorithms were pushing out at a gargantuan rate, this is China trying to further divide the United States of America. And this is one of the big failings among many of the Trump administration. He talked tough about TikTok. I heard him do it many times. But when it came down to it, he did not ban them when he could have and should have. And now since then, we've had an additional nearly 6 years of this type of poison being put out throughout the United States, even putting aside the spying, which we know is going on, and the theft of American personal data and information. So in my first week as president, we would ban TikTok. They want to go ahead and sell it, let them go ahead and sell it. But I'll tell you another reason we would do it. Facebook's not in China. X is not in China. They're not permitting a free flow of information to the Chinese people from our social media companies, yet we just open the door and let them do what they're doing. TikTok should be banned because they are poisoning American minds, and I would do it week one.
Thank you, Governor. I want to go to Governor DeSantis. Would you ban or force the sale of TikTok, regardless of whether or not China allowed American apps to operate in China?
Yes, I think that China is the top threat we face. They've been very effective at infiltrating different parts of our society. So my policy on China and the Chinese Communist Party is very simple. We win, they lose. And in order to do that, it's not just military. It's economic, and it's cultural. And as the dad of a 6'5" and a 3-year-old, I'm concerned about the data that they're getting from our young people and what they're doing to pollute the minds of our young people. These kids get these devices and they have a mind of their own. And I know a lot of parents are looking, it's hard to even keep it out. China's obviously the most extreme, but this is happening with other things. So we are going to do that, and we are going to make sure to protect the American people. It's a full spectrum approach to be able to fend China off. Yes, military deterrence. Yes, economic decoupling, but also their role in our culture. If we ignore that, we're not going to be able to win the fight.
Thank you, Governor. Ambassador Haley, speak to the parents out there. There are probably TikTok apps on half the phones in this auditorium.
No, I'm going to speak to the fact that 2 people hit me and you didn't let me respond. So let's first talk about the fact that they want to talk about the Chinese land from 10 years ago. Yes, I brought a fiberglass company 10 years ago to South Carolina. But Ron, you are the chair of your economic development agency that as of last week said Florida is the ideal place for Chinese businesses. Not only that, you have a company that is manufacturer of Chinese military planes. You have it. They are expanding 2 training sites at 2 of your airports now, one which is 12 miles.
Even though I like Nikki Haley, I don't think any of this is productive personally, all the attacks. I'm not a fan of all these attacks. I would prefer her to kind of just defend her integrity. But she just kind of put it to bed saying that, I think she said fiberglass. Let me rewind it.
Development agent, Chinese land.
The phones in this
years ago. Yes, I brought a fiberglass company 10 years ago to South Carolina. But Ron,
she brought a fiberglass company to South Carolina. So basically, to kind of give context, DeSantis and Vivek were scrutinizing her for allowing a Chinese company on the state, which is kind of ridiculous if we're being honest. A Chinese-owned company on the state. It was a fiberglass company. Fiberglass. Like, it's not anything crazy, right? So, again, just using tricky terminology. So it's a good way to kind of put that to bed. Like, okay, they're a fiberglass company. Am I gonna say no just to every company for a state? Like, I'm not. What? I think that's her point.
You are the chair of your economic development agency that, as of last week, said Florida is the ideal place for Chinese businesses. Not only that, you have a company that is manufacturer of Chinese military planes. You have it. They are expanding 2 training sites at 2 of your airports now, one which is 12 miles away from a naval base. Then you have another company that's expanding, and they were just invaded by the Department of Homeland Security. So
Jesus. DeSantis cooking. Am I biased towards Nikki Haley? Yes, because I think she's the best politician here. Cooking DeSantis. Cooking DeSantis. That's all I gotta say.
Mine was 10 years ago.
You gave
Yours
them
was
stuff.
6
I
months
didn't
ago.
give them anything.
What's your story?
And I abolished that agency that she's talking about.
No,
Enterprise Florida, we abolished it. And of course, we banned China from buying
the
land.
website
Not
last
exactly
week.
a
Go
great
check.
recruiting pitch if you're banning
6 months ago. DeSantis kind of cooked. He scrubbed the website last week. It's kind of crazy. Scrubbed a website last week is crazy. That seems suspect as hell. Not gonna lie. So website last week.
them from purchasing land.
You scrubbed the website
so we've stood up and
Thank you,
done the
Ambassador
right thing
Haley.
in Florida.
Mr. Ramaswamy, we've talked about this. You campaign on TikTok. How do you get TikTok banned if you use it?
Well, I want to laugh at why Nikki Haley didn't answer your question, which is about looking at families in the eye. In the last debate, she made fun of me for actually joining TikTok while her own daughter was actually using the app for a long time. So you might want to take care of your family first.
Leave my
before
daughter
preaching
out
to
of your
anybody else's
voice.
adult daughter. The next generation.
How old is Nikki Haley's daughter? Hold up. This might be a terrible point. How old is Nikki Haley's daughter? Her daughter's 24 years old. Imagine criticizing someone for their daughter's actions at 24 years old using TikTok. Like, what? What is that point? What are we talking about? I'm guessing Vivek tried to look up dirt on Nikki Haley using TikTok. He couldn't find anything, so he went to his daughter using TikTok. That is so, bro, what? That is so fucking, oh my goodness.
Of Americans are using it, and that's actually the point. You have her supporters propping her up. That's fine. Here's the truth.
You're just
the easy
scum.
answer is actually to say that we're just going to ban one app. We got to go further. We have to ban any U.S. company actually transferring U.S. data to the Chinese. Here's a story most people don't know. Airbnb hands over U.S. user data to the CCP. Now, that's a U.S.-owned company. So this is the problem when you have Republicans that temporarily go.
Vivek, you use TikTok. What? You use TikTok. What are you talking about?
The way the winds blow, and now it's popular to talk tough on China. When she was UN ambassador, called them literally, her words, not mine, our great friend. You can't be fair weather fans of the right policy. Get to the root cause. Even U.S. companies in Silicon Valley are regularly doing it. Cut the virtue signaling. The fact of the matter is Democrats are on TikTok today. The only person, one of the few people who is putting up content the way the actual algorithms work, speaking for pro-Israel views or others, is
Ambassador
me. And I
Haley,
predict more Republicans will join it. But stop U.S. companies from turning over data to Chinese companies. That's the real answer, not the virtue.
Vivek says China's a problem. China steals data from Americans. I also use China. I also use TikTok. Vivek is just so hypocritical. He just be talking. He just
don't get to respond to personal attacks, but you do.
Thank you very much. You know, when he talks about me praising China, he doesn't know the fact that the reason China was praised was because I negotiated with China and Russia the largest set of sanctions against North Korea in a generation. That is literally the reason North Korea stopped testing ballistic missiles. So I said China did good on their part. That was a negotiation you could never do.
What you said, Nikki. Those are your words, not mine. And so just own up to it.
You would never
you can
have
change
been
your
able to
mind.
get
That's
that
allowed.
negotiation
But don't
done.
lie to the people about what you've said or what you've done in
China,
South Carolina.
My
you have brought
entire
them to South
career
Carolina.
at the
Ron is
United
right
Nations.
about that.
Every day I fought China, and I did it by making sure
hard
no
facts.
one
You
could
brought
get
them to this
any
country.
agency heads in UN. I did it by making sure that we called them out on human rights. I did it by making sure that we held them accountable on everything that they did. That's the reason we got out of the Human Rights Council. That's the reason we called them out. And there's not been a day I haven't
Nikki,
stopped
Senator
reading
Scott, it is your turn.
Policy experience with the millions you made afterwards.
Everybody else is hanging on to the rules here, Mr. Ramaswamy. Senator Scott.
Thank you. We should.
Vivek is trying so hard to battle with Nikki, and I just don't think he's doing a good job. I'll be honest. I don't get his points that he does with Nikki Haley. He did which is crazy. We as Republicans should stop virtue signaling. You call China our good friend. Like, what? And then Nikki Haley's response is, yeah, I was talking about how I was brokering a deal between China and North Korea to put better sanctions on North Korea, and then China did a good job in ensuring that, to ensure that North Korea, I think stop nuclear testing, is what she said? I think that's what she said. I might be wrong. I don't want to rewind. And yeah, I was making sure that a potential enemy, I was making sure they don't do this. Vivek says, but you called him our good friend. What, Vivek? Get better ammo, buddy. Your ammo sucks. You're like, Vivek's ammo on Nikki Haley is, oh, your older daughter who's 24 years old uses TikTok. What? Oh, you allowed a fiberglass company in South Carolina to do business. What? Vivek, you had companies that worked with China. Vivek, you use TikTok. What is Vivek talking about, bro?
In Florida. Former President Trump and President Biden have taken different approaches to Nicolas Maduro's regime with little result. Former President Trump put economic pressure on Venezuela and backed one of Maduro's rivals. President Biden temporarily eased sanctions to encourage electoral reforms. Governor DeSantis, do you see the political situation in Venezuela as a threat to the United States, and what would your approach be?
We should never rely on Venezuela for oil like Biden has had to go beg. I'm going to unleash all of America's energy potential. On day one, I'm taking all the Biden regulations, the Green New Deal, ripping it up and throwing it in the trash can where it belongs. We're going to lower your gas prices. We're going to create jobs. We're going to lower energy costs. But we're also going to be more energy independent and secure. We'll choose Midland over Moscow. We'll choose the Marcellus over the Mullahs. And we'll choose Bakken over Beijing. That is good for America's national security. Biden's Green New Deal, that's good for Venezuela, it's good for Russia, it's good for Iran, and it's good for China. So I would turn the screws on the Venezuelan regime. I think it's a corrupt, dictatorial regime, and we should never go hat in hand begging for oil from them.
Just to be clear, would you reimpose the sanctions?
Yes, absolutely.
Ambassador Haley, what would your approach be?
You know, I stood on the Simon Bolivar Bridge and watched thousands of Venezuelans cross in the for hours in the hot sun holding their babies to get the one meal they might get that day, going from Venezuela to Colombia. They were fleeing socialism and begging for freedom. We need to make sure that we do everything we can to sanction Maduro. We shouldn't be getting dirty oil, and Biden just gave 500,000 Venezuelans temporary priority status, which is just going to have more of them come. But on the energy side, it cracks me up that Ron continues to do this. He has opposed fracking. He's opposed drilling. Last time he said it wasn't true, and everybody found out that it was true. He opposed it before Florida voters even voted on it. He was praised by the Sierra Club, and you're trying to make up for it and act like you weren't a liberal when it comes to the environment. You were. You always have been. Just own it if that's the case. But don't keep saying you're something that you're not.
Let me respond to that. Our whole energy plan, you can't get the shale without fracking. We are absolutely going to frack, but I disagree with Nikki Haley. I don't think it's a good idea to drill in the Florida Everglades, and I know most Floridians agree with me.
You banned fracking.
Thank you very much. Lester?
All right, thank you. Let's turn to one of the biggest issues for voters. That, of course, is the economy. This is a question that will go to all of you. An Iowa voter recently told NBC News, "How am I going to make sure my pantry is stocked without breaking the bank?" You've all said the best way to deal with rising prices.
From everything I've seen, like, I think Trump would actually fare pretty well against Nikki Haley, not because he knows better policies, not because he knows more about how to run or like knows more in general about government and international issues. I think she probably knows the most about international issues. I think there's a reason why she's an ambassador. But because Donald Trump makes it his mission to dilute the conversation, and that's going to piss off Nikki Haley, I'm sure. I'm so curious. I mean, unfortunately, we're probably going to get a DeSantis Trump final two, but I would prefer Nikki Haley Trump final
prices is to cut government spending. But that would take time to play out, and Americans are struggling right now. Senator Scott, I'll start with you. What would you do the moment you take office to help Americans manage the cost of living? So we're talking about short term here.
My mother was a single mother who raised me and my brother in a very challenging economic situation. The first thing I can tell you,
Sorry, Scott, I don't care.
Me that
ways that would put people on a better economic footing right away.
So I started off working minimum wage jobs. I did $6 an hour as an electrician's assistant. I worked all kinds of things to be able to get through school. And I did that because I believed in America, if you work hard and get the most out of your God-given ability, you can get ahead. And what's happening now, many of you are working hard and you're falling further and further behind. I've met people in Iowa, New Hampshire, and all across the country who've talked about all the burdens that they're facing with the rising prices. And I've heard from multiple people the same story. When they go grocery shopping, what they now do is they figure out what they have to take out of the cart once it's ringing up, because it rings up so much faster and so much higher at the cash register that they can't afford the full cart of groceries anymore. We have to restore the American dream in this country. What can you do on day one? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take all the executive orders, the regulations, everything involving Bidenomics. I'm going to rip it up, and I'm going to throw it in the trash can on day one where it belongs. That is going to give the economy breathing room, and I'm also going to rein in the Federal Reserve. They have helped create, with their reckless monetary policy, what we have faced since the COVID-19 pandemic. They botched it. Congress botched it. Both parties are to blame. Fed should focus on stable.
That's hilarious that he said both parties to blame. The first time this was brought up, in the first debate, Nikki Haley was the only one that said that. I mean,
prices, they are not an economic central planner for the American people.
Governor, thank you. Mr. Ramaswamy, weigh in on this. Sure. Ways that you can improve people's financial condition in the short term.
Right. And as a CEO, the economic question is core to my vision and policy prescription for this country. Increase the supply of everything. It's the law of supplies and demand. Increase the supply of energy. That brings down the cost of energy, grows the economy. Drill, frack, burn coal, embrace nuclear. Increase the supply of labor in this country. Stop using our taxpayer money to pay people more to stay at home instead of to go to work. Increase the supply of housing. People don't talk about this one in the Republican Party.
What does that mean? Are you talking about welfare? I need to be more specific about that.
The land use restrictions are constricting the supply of housing. That's making housing more expensive for ordinary Americans across this country. So that's the true answer.
Land use restriction? What do you mean by that too? I think I need some specifics on those. Are you referring to that there are certain properties that are owned by certain people? Or are you talking about certain lands that can't be used due to environmental issues? I don't know what he means by that.
I think it takes a CEO in the White House who actually understands this to get this done. Because Americans at home, they know the Bidenomics is a lie. Prices are going up. Interest rates and mortgages to buy your home are going up. But wages have remained flat. That's the hard diagnosis for our economy. And this is about more than just our economy. I say this as a member of my generation. I'm 38 years old. I'm the youngest person ever to run for U.S. president as a Republican. The reason my generation has lost our sense of national pride, in part, is because people in my generation feel like the American dream isn't available to them. And part of the reason why is we've burdened them with four-year college degrees that did not serve their head start on the American dream. People will be more proud of a country if we're all making more money in that country. This is how we revive national pride and our identity, and it will take a CEO in the White House with zero-based budgeting, by the way, to take on the federal debt to get this job done.
Let me turn to Governor Christie on that.
Well, look, Lester, part of the entire premise of the question, and I agree with Tim on this, is absolutely energy is the key to this because it drives every one of those other prices. You know, now food gets to your grocery store, it gets trucked. And those truckers have to pay for fuel and for the higher fuel prices. And when you go ahead and you tell people, we are going to unleash every bit of American energy, every bit of its potential, what happens in the futures markets? The prices go down because those people who are believing that the Biden program will continue are the ones who are bidding this up. And let me tell you the other place that's bidding it up, in the Middle East. And so if you don't believe that making sure that Israel and that Israel situation that's going on right now isn't resolved and resolved quickly as President of the United States and bring stability back, that will also not permit countries like Saudi Arabia and others to be able to jack their prices as well in what they say is in response to a crisis, when it's really what it's in response to is putting more money in their pockets. When they have an American president who knows that Israel must be defended not with humanitarian pauses and not with suggestions for ceasefire, but with letting them know we will supply them with everything they need, that will also bring stability to the market. Energy is the key to bringing this down. It's what every American family needs when they turn on their lights, fill up their car, and go to the grocery store. And we need to do that first and foremost. That's the short-term answer.
Governor Christie, thank you. Ambassador Hillary, let me come at this from a slightly different direction. Americans in rural communities are being especially squeezed by inflation right now. An Iowa State University study found that last year inflation cost rural households about an extra $5,000. How would you specifically help rural Americans who are suffering right now, Ambassador?
Well, I'm a product of rural America. I grew up in rural South Carolina, and I can tell you what we're seeing now in America is the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. We have to go and start beefing up the middle class, and the first thing I would do is I will eliminate the federal gas and diesel tax in this country. We'll cut taxes on the middle class, but we have to stop this spending binge that's happening by Republicans and Democrats in Congress. I will make sure, one, we claw back the $500 billion of unspent COVID dollars that are out there. Instead of 87,000 IRS agents going after middle America, we'll go after the hundreds of billions of dollars of COVID fraud that exist, one out of every $7. We'll stop the spending, we'll stop the borrowing, we'll eliminate the earmarks, and I'll veto any spending bill that doesn't go back to pre-COVID levels. That will cut trillions and allow us to be safe. We also need to be not energy independent, energy dominant. We are blessed with resources, let's do it. But the reason no one should give you a number, Hugh, on the amount of ships in the Navy is because in a few years, our interest expense is going to be more than our defense budget. So no one can give you that number realistically without first tackling what's happening with the financial situation. It would be a false number to give you that. We have got to understand this is a crisis. It is a national security concern. If we don't deal with what's going to happen with that interest expense in a few years, we're going to look like Japan. And we can't let that happen. The strong dollar matters.
Ambassador, thank you very much. Kristen.
Americans could see Americans could see their Social Security benefits drastically cut in the next decade because the program is running out of money. Former President Trump has said, quote, under no circumstances should Republicans cut entitlements. Governor Christie, first to you. You have proposed raising the retirement age for younger Americans. What would that age be specifically, and would you consider making any other reforms to Social Security?
Sure, and we have to deal with this problem. Now, look, if we raise the retirement age a few years for folks that are in their 30s and 40s, I have a son who's in the audience tonight who's 30 years old. If he can't adjust to a few-year increase in Social Security retirement age over the next 40 years, I got bigger problems with him than his Social Security payments. And the fact is, we need to be realistic about this. There are only three things that go into determining whether Social Security can be solvent or not: retirement age, eligibility for the program in general, and taxes. That's it. We are already overtaxed in this country, and we should not raise those taxes. But on eligibility also, I don't know if out there...
My thing is, like, I don't know about the overtax stuff. I'm gonna be honest. I don't, because we see, I mean, it's hard to really kind of have a solid position, because you can say we're overtaxed, but the purpose of taxes is to create better utilities and better public institutions for the people, right? And obviously just resources in general. It's more so, I don't think it's an overtax situation versus a inefficient allocation of resource situation, right? So it's tough for me to say this, because I think taxes are good generally, because taxes play into part state budget, public education, public transportation, military, obviously, police departments. All that is very important, and we want to have the best of those things. If we cut taxes, we're putting a lot of the responsibility on these situations into privatized markets, privatized education, privatized transportation, privatized security. It's a very interesting conversation. Will America benefit more in a capitalist system if more public sectors were privatized? Very good question. Probably write that as a topic. Let me write this down right here. I don't know the answer. It's an interesting question, though.
There tonight, and if you're watching Warren, I don't know if Warren Buffett is collecting Social Security, but if he is, shame on you. You shouldn't be taking the money. There are a lot of programs in this country that we all pay for that we don't get a direct benefit from. Food stamps is one of them. I've never, fortunately in my life, ever had me or my family on food stamps, but I'm glad it's there so that no one in this country goes to bed hungry at night if they have availability to that program. But I don't get a direct benefit. The fact is, on Social Security, remember why it was established. It was established as a safety net program to make sure that no one would grow old in this country in poverty. That's what we got to get back to. Rich people should not be collecting Social Security.
Governor, can you give me a specific age, 69, 70? What would the age be?
No, look, that's going to be a part of a negotiation with Congress, Kirsten, and hell, I'm not going to start negotiating until I get there.
All right, Ambassador Haley, let me have you weigh in on this, because you said in June that you would be open to raising the retirement age. Have you determined what that age would be specifically, and what other reforms are you looking at?
So first of all, any candidate that tells you that they're not going to take on entitlements is not being serious. Social Security will go bankrupt in 10 years. Medicare will go bankrupt in 8. Right now, you have Ron and Trump joining Biden and Pelosi saying they're not going to change or do any sort of entitlement reform. What we need to do is keep our promises. Those that have been promised should keep it. But for like my kids in their 20s, you go and you say we're going to change the rules. You change the retirement age for them. Instead of cost of living increases, we should go to increases based on inflation. We should limit benefits on the wealthy. Bernie Marcus can tell you he hates getting that check. Limit the benefits on the wealthy, and then expand Medicare Advantage plans. Seniors love that, and let's make sure we do that so that they can have more competition. That's how we'll deal with entitlement reform, and that's how we'll start to pay down this debt.
And can you give me a specific age? Have you determined the age?
Again, you have to work with Chris. What I can tell you is it's going to be those in their 20s just coming into the system, and it should reflect more of life expectancy. It doesn't do that now.
All right, Mr. Ramaswamy, have you determined if you would touch entitlements and Social Security? What, if any, reforms are you looking at?
So this is really important right now. We're working within the last window I believe we will have to actually fix this problem while still leaving Social Security and Medicare benefits for current seniors intact. I'll tell you how. The other candidates assume, like Nikki, that it can't be done. And on her math, she's right about it. But her math assumes $7 trillion of our $33 trillion national debt going to fight wars like in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. Minus that, our national debt would be $26 trillion right now. Then you go to zero-based budgeting, which I've proposed as a CEO. It's how I've run businesses. It's how many CEOs run businesses. Don't use last year's budget as the baseline. Start with zero as the baseline and then ask what's actually necessary. 75% headcount reduction. Yes, that is severe. In the number of federal employees in the Washington, D.C. bureaucracy. Shut down redundant agencies that should not exist.